Alexander Reed, a young billionaire and the owner of one of the most luxurious hotel chains in the world. With wealth and success at his fingertips, he had everything, except the peace he craved after long, exhausting days. One night, after finishing an important meeting, Alexander returned to his private penthouse inside his hotel, expecting a quiet and relaxing evening. But as he stepped into his bathroom, he froze. A young woman was fast asleep on his toilet seat. Instead of anger, curiosity sparked in him. Who was she? Why was she here? And most importantly, why did this ridiculous sight make him want to laugh instead of rage? Alexander had no idea that this bizarre encounter would change his life forever. Emma Carter, a housekeeping staff at Reed Empire Hotel, was utterly exhausted. Covering a night shift for her lazy coworker, she had spent the past week running on fumes. Her eyes burned, her limbs ached, and all she wanted was to finish her final task, cleaning the hotel owner's penthouse. The opulence of the room left her speechless. Crystal chandeliers sparkled against floor-to-ceiling windows, every surface gleamed, and the bathroom was so massive it could fit her entire apartment. "This isn't a hotel, it's a palace," Emma mumbled as she started scrubbing. But as she bent over to clean the bathtub, a sudden wave of exhaustion hit her. "Just 5 seconds," she thought, resting her head against her arm, and just like that, she fell asleep, right on top of the toilet seat. The moment Alexander walked into the bathroom, he nearly screamed. "What the hell?" Emma jolted awake, panicked, and tumbled onto the floor, knocking over the mop bucket. Standing before her was a tall man, his shirt unbuttoned, his expression a mix of shock and fury. "Who are you, and why are you sleeping in my bathroom?" Emma stammered, desperately trying to explain, but every word only made things worse. Meanwhile, Alexander wasn't sure whether to be outraged or just laugh at the absurdity of it all. Emma sat on the floor, heart pounding, staring up at Alexander in panic. "I didn't steal anything, she swallowed hard. "I just fell asleep." Alexander crossed his arms, frowning. "Fell asleep? In my bathroom?" Emma hurriedly explained her exhausting work schedule, expecting anger, expecting him to fire her on the spot. But instead of rage, Alexander suddenly paused, sniffing the air. He turned, grabbed a coffee cup from the counter, and held it out to her. "Do you drink coffee?" Emma frowned. "Yes, but this one smells." She stopped, took a whiff, and cringed. Burnt. The beans were over-roasted, making it overly bitter. Someone tried to fix it with sugar, but that only made it worse. Alexander blinked. "You figured all that out just from the smell?" Emma nodded, slightly confused. "Doesn't everyone?" Alexander chuckled, but instead of mocking her, his eyes gleamed with intrigue. "No, they don't." He set the cup down and studied her like he had just found a hidden gem. "Follow me." Confused, Emma stood up and followed Alexander down to the hotel's main kitchen. Inside, a team of chefs was busy preparing breakfast. Marco Vasquez, the hotel's esteemed head chef, scowled when he saw Emma. "What's she doing here?" Marco asked, his tone laced with irritation. Alexander gestured toward Emma. "She can tell what's wrong with food just by smelling it. Let her taste today's breakfast." Emma's eyes widened. "Wait, I'm just a housekeeper." "Not anymore," Alexander said smoothly. "Today, you're a food critic." Marco smirked, arms crossed. "All right then, kid, go ahead." Emma picked up a fork, took a deep breath, and bit into the scrambled eggs. Immediately, she grimaced. "Too dry. You used low-quality butter, and the salt is off." Marco raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah?" Emma grabbed a piece of bread and frowned. "This isn't fresh. Either it was baked yesterday or stored improperly." She sipped the orange juice and nearly choked. "Oh my God. Who mixed fresh juice with store-bought and thought it was a good idea?" Alexander burst into laughter. Marco, though reluctant, had to admit she was right. Seems like the girl actually knows what she's talking about." Alexander turned to Emma, a victorious smile on his lips. "I knew it." And that was the moment Emma Carter, a mere housekeeper, suddenly became the most important person in the hotel kitchen. Emma still couldn't believe what was happening. Just a week ago, she was a struggling housekeeper drowning in bills. Now, she was sitting in the first-class cabin of a private jet, flying to Paris with Alexander Reed, the arrogant billionaire who had somehow turned her life upside down. "I still don't understand why I'm here," Emma muttered, staring out the window as clouds drifted by. Alexander, sipping a glass of wine, simply shrugged. "You have talent, Carter, and if I want to learn more about it, I'll take you to the best place." Paris, the culinary capital of the world. Emma swallowed hard. She might have impressed a few people at the hotel, but Paris was a whole different level. At the extravagant food event, Emma quickly realized she was out of place. The room was filled with renowned chefs, powerful business moguls, and influential critics. The looks she received ranged from curiosity to open disdain, and no one made their opinion clearer than Isabelle Laurent, a strikingly beautiful and powerful businesswoman who had once been close to Alexander. "Alexander, you never cease to surprise me," Isabelle smiled, her gaze sweeping over Emma with thinly veiled condescension. "I didn't think you enjoyed traveling with this kind of company." Emma clenched her fists. Alexander's expression remained unreadable. "Emma isn't just a guest. She's the only person I trust when it comes to evaluating quality." Isabelle arched an eyebrow, intrigued yet doubtful. She picked up a wineglass and handed it to Emma. "If you're as talented as he says, why don't you prove it?" Isabelle challenged, her smile smug. "Can you guess what kind of wine this is?" Emma took a deep breath, lifted the glass and inhaled. The aroma was rich, bold, with hints of oak and subtle fruity notes. She took a sip, letting the flavors settle on her tongue, analyzing each layer. Setting the glass down, she spoke confidently. This was aged in oak barrels with a light fruitiness. Definitely a young Bordeaux, around 3 years old. Silence. Isabelle blinked. A nearby sommelier nodded in confirmation. "She's correct." Alexander smirked. "She always is." Emma met Isabelle's gaze and saw the flicker of irritation in her eyes. But for the first time, it didn't matter. She had just proven she wasn't some clueless outsider. Emma thought things would get easier after proving her talent. She was wrong. The next morning, as she stepped into the hotel lobby, she felt dozens of eyes on her. Some people whispered, others smirked. A chill ran down her spine. Her phone buzzed, a message from Carla, her friend back at the hotel. "Emma, have you seen the news?" Frowning, Emma opened her browser, and the moment she saw the headline, her stomach dropped. "Billionaire Alexander Reed involved with hotel housekeeper. Suspicious relationship uncovered." The article was accompanied by a photo of her and Alexander at last night's event, alongside countless speculations that she wasn't being valued for her skills, but for something far more scandalous. Emma felt frozen in place. Before she could even think about what to do, Alexander appeared. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned with quiet fury. "Come with me," he said, his voice low yet commanding. Emma barely had time to react before he led her into a private conference room where a team of PR specialists and executives were waiting. "We're shutting this rumor down immediately," Alexander declared, taking a seat, his sharp gaze fixed on the article displayed on a large screen. Emma hesitated. "What are you going to do?" He crossed his arms. "I'm holding a press conference." Her eyes widened. "They won't believe you. They just want a scandal." Alexander smirked. "I don't need them to believe me. I just need them to know the truth." A few hours later, inside the hotel's grand conference hall, the press was already gathered, cameras flashing as Alexander stepped onto the stage. "I'm sure you've all seen the headlines," he began, his voice calm but authoritative. "So let me set the record straight." Silence fell over the room. "Emma Carter is not here because of any relationship with me. She's here because she's talented. And if any of you doubt that, feel free to test her yourselves." Emma stared at him, her heart pounding. He wasn't just defending her. He was placing his full confidence in her abilities. Rumors spread fast, but this time, the truth was even stronger. The press conference ended, but long after the cameras stopped flashing, Emma couldn't shake the unease creeping into her heart. That night, as she stood on the balcony of her hotel room, gazing at the dazzling Paris skyline, a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. "What's on your mind, Carter?" She turned to see Alexander leaning against the doorway, a glass of wine in hand. Emma took a deep breath, wrestling with the emotions inside her. "I'm just wondering, why are you doing all of this for me?" Alexander studied her for a moment before stepping closer. "Because you deserve it." Her heart skipped a beat. "Not because you feel responsible for me?" A small smirk played on his lips as he set his glass down and met her gaze. "If it was just responsibility, I wouldn't care this much." The silence between them grew heavier, not awkward, but charged. "Emma," Alexander murmured, his voice lower, more certain. "You're the only person who's ever made me break all my own rules." Emma inhaled sharply, her breath catching. She had spent her whole life running from things that could hurt her, but this time she didn't want to run. Before she could overthink, she stepped forward, grasping the fabric of his shirt, pulling him down closer. And for the first time, they kissed. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't hesitant. It was the answer to every unspoken question between them. After their first kiss, everything between Emma and Alexander shifted. The sharp remarks, the unspoken distance between a billionaire and a housekeeper, none of it mattered anymore. Now they were just two people learning how to care for each other. The next morning, Alexander pulled Emma out of the hotel, determined to show her the true magic of Paris. "You know," Emma said, laughing as she peeked into a pastry shop, "I've never had a real macaron before." Alexander raised an eyebrow. "You've been in Paris for nearly a week and haven't tried one? That's criminal." 5 minutes later, they were sitting by the Seine, a box of colorful macarons between them. Emma took a bite, her eyes widening. "Oh my God, is this what heaven tastes like?" Alexander chuckled, resting his chin on his hand as he watched her. "You're easier to impress than I expected." The morning passed with laughter, light touches, and lingering glances that said more than words ever could. Alexander was no longer the untouchable billionaire, and Emma no longer felt like an outsider. As the sun set, they strolled along the Champs-Élysées. Emma casually looped her arm through Alexander's as if she had done it 100 times before. "Do you regret coming to Paris?" Alexander asked. Emma leaned against his shoulder, smiling. "No, and I think I've never been this happy." Alexander squeezed her hand gently. He knew then he had never met anyone like Emma before, and for the first time in his life, he didn't care about any rules, only her. Paris had changed everything, but real life awaited them in New York, where the true test of their relationship would begin. Emma was no longer an anonymous housekeeper. Now she was Reed Empire Hotel's lead food consultant, attending high-profile events and working alongside Alexander to elevate the hotel's culinary excellence. But more than anything, the distance between them had vanished. 3 months later, on a crisp autumn evening, Alexander told her to keep the day free, but refused to say why. They wandered through the glowing city streets, visited a cafe where Emma had once dreamed of tasting an overpriced pastry, and finally, as night fell, Alexander led her onto a helicopter. "What are you up to?" Emma laughed, her heart pounding as they soared above the glittering skyline. Alexander smirked. "Wait and see." As the helicopter hovered over a secluded riverside park, Emma's breath caught in her throat. The area below, once dark and empty, suddenly lit up, but not with traditional lights. Hundreds of drones began to rise from the ground, forming dazzling golden patterns against the sky. One by one, they moved in perfect synchrony, aligning into glowing letters. Emma's eyes widened in shock as the lights shifted into 3 simple yet life-changing words. "Marry me?" Her breath hitched. She barely had time to process before Alexander gently tugged her hand, making her turn toward him. And then she saw it. Alexander was no longer sitting. He was kneeling. Right there, inside the helicopter, his steady hands holding a velvet box, a breathtaking ring glistening inside. Emma Carter, his voice, usually firm and commanding, now carried a rare tenderness. "From the moment you crashed, quite literally, into my life, nothing has been the same. You challenge me, frustrate me, and somehow make everything make sense." Emma let out a shaky laugh, her vision blurring with unshed tears. Alexander opened the velvet box, revealing a ring that shimmered like the stars above them. "I don't just want you in my life, I need you. You are the only rule I am willing to break, the only risk I am willing to take. So, Emma, will you make this chaos permanent and marry me?" Tears finally spilled over as Emma covered her mouth, nodding frantically before whispering, "Yes, 1,000,000 times yes." As Alexander slid the ring onto her trembling finger, a final wave of drones ascended into the sky, forming a heart shape before dissolving into a synchronized fireworks display. The night exploded in color, a grand celebration high above New York City. 2 weeks after the wedding, Emma stood in the bathroom, eyes locked on the pregnancy test in her hands. 2 lines. Her breath hitched. Her heart pounded against her ribs. She, someone who had spent her life just trying to survive, was about to become a mother. The door creaked open, and Alexander stepped inside, sleeves rolled up, looking relaxed. But the second he saw Emma's expression, his entire body tensed. "Emma?" He gently touched her shoulder. "What's wrong?" Emma turned to face him, hands trembling as she held up the test. Emma's hands trembled as she stared at the pregnancy test. 2 lines. Clear as day. Her breath hitched. No way. No way. Just then, the bathroom door creaked open and Alexander stepped inside. He was mid-sentence, holding a newspaper, when he froze. "Emma, what's wrong?" She turned to him, her fingers gripping the test so tightly her knuckles turned white. Wordlessly, she held it up. Alexander took it, his eyes scanning over the small device, his mind taking a moment to catch up. Blink. Once, twice. His breath came out in a shaky exhale. We're having a baby?" Emma couldn't speak. She just nodded as a single tear slipped down her cheek. For a long second, Alexander didn't move. Then, as if reality crashed into him all at once, he let out a disbelieving laugh, one hand running through his hair. Then, without warning, he scooped Emma up into his arms, spinning her around, his laughter mixing with hers. "Emma," he whispered, his forehead resting against hers. "You didn't just change my life. You gave it meaning." She smiled through her tears, pressing her hands to his cheeks. "Looks like you're stuck with me forever, Reed. And I wouldn't have it any other way." And for the first time in her life, she knew she had finally found where she truly belonged.